let's take a quick look at where we're going. I'm sure you've seen plenty of sign-in pages before, but here's an example. So this is essentially what we're going to have as our sign-in page. This will be behind this sign-in link here. And the idea is that users will sign in with their email address and their password, and then when you click on sign in, it will sign in the user. So what does that mean, though? Like, what's going to happen when you sign in? In order to start thinking about how we're going to implement this little button here, it's a good idea to start thinking in terms of REST resources. Now remember that a resource in web development is something that can be created and updated and deleted through the web. And so far in the demo app, we saw users and microposts implemented as resources, and we're currently in the middle of working on the users resource. We're going to complete it in the next lesson. But in this lesson, we're actually going to have a new resource. And if you think about what this sign-in button does, what it does is it's something. It creates this idea of being signed in. And so in order to understand what this button will do, what the sign-in button will do, we have to introduce the idea of sessions. And so what this button will ultimately do is create a new session. In the Rails tutorial book, there's a link to the Wikipedia article on session, and I encourage you to read about it. But the idea of a session is that it's just some sort of connection, usually thought of as semi-permanent, that it persists for a while, but not necessarily forever. But it's a semi-permanent connection between two computers. In this case, the client computer, which is running the web browser, and the server, which in this case is actually the same physical machine, but as we've seen, we've already deployed our application to Heroku. In that case, the server is on a remote machine somewhere. But in any case, a session is this idea of a connection between these two computers. And so what we need is some way to keep track of which user is signed in as we click from page to page. So the Hypertext Transfer Protocol is what's known as a stateless protocol, which means that there's no way inside of HTTP to tell that if you click on this link and then click on this link, say, that we're the same user clicking from page to page. So a session is the way we solve this problem in web development, and as you might expect, Rails has a very convenient way of implementing sessions. Now, since sessions are things that can be created and destroyed, that is to say, on a sign-in, you create a session, and on sign-out, you destroy it, it's natural to model sessions as a REST resource. We can get started with that by creating a controller for sessions. So let's do that. Rails generate controller sessions. Now, you may recall from when we generated the user's controller that we included one of the actions at the command line. At that time, we knew that we were going to want a page to create new users, that is to say, a sign-up page. In this case, we know we're going to need a sign-in page, and if you think about that, that's exactly what a new sessions page would be. So let's do that, new. This will automatically generate a new action and a view to go along with it. And so let's take a look at that. If we look in app, controllers, sessions controller, here we go, we've got our new action. And we can actually go there now. Let's take a look. Well, let's take a look at the routes file. Let's just remind you, it's config routes. So now we've got get sessions /new. We'll be changing that shortly, but for now this will work. So let's do /sessions /new. And there we go. So let's write a couple tests for this new sessions page. Our sessions controller, and in spec controller sessions controller spec, we've got this get new. It should be successful. And as in previous tests, I'm going to change that to a symbol because I like to think of the action as being a symbol. And now this should be passing. Let's take a look. Autotest is actually running here. Oh, looks like we've got a failing test. Look at that. Yeah, so this is because there was a problem with the route. You see no route matches controller sessions action new. This may work for you, but as usual, I'm running Spork, so I've got to restart Spork. Okay, so now we're green, except we're actually yellow, and this is a reminder that we've got some helper and view specs, then remember I don't like those, so I'm going to axe them. Sometimes I do use helper specs on rare occasions. I don't think I ever use view specs. So let's remove them. Spec views and spec helpers. And now let's see, we should be green after that. Good. So what else should happen on this page? Well, it should have the right title. That's one of the things we've done on, say, the user's controller spec. We've been testing the title for the new, say, the new users page. In fact, we can crib this here. It's almost exactly the same. Right, it should have the right title. Get new response should have selector title, and instead of sign up, it should be sign in. And that's red because it's not working yet. Let's do @title equals sign in. Okay, so that's still red because remember when we test something like the title, anytime we use the /selector tag, we have to render views. And there we go. Now we're green, and we're ready to get started on what this page is going to be. So let's get our routes in order first. You may have noticed here that we were at /sessions/new, but as with the sign up page, instead of going to /users/new, we go to /signup. So for sign in, you might guess that we want to go to /signin. So let's arrange for that to happen. I'm going to preemptively close this work server. So let's look at the routes. Now we've got get sessions/new, but we don't actually need this. What we want is a resource for sessions. So resources sessions, and now there's an optional hash argument here to restrict the actions supported by this session. So with users, we actually want everything, but for the sessions resource, we only need three things. We need an action for new sessions, we need an action to actually create the session, and then we need an action to destroy it. So let's do that here. We can give it an option only, and then an array of the of symbols corresponding to the actions we want. You can see why I like using symbols for actions. New, create, destroy. Actually, it's possible that strings work here too, but actions look nicer, or symbols look nicer, rather. At least I think so. And let's also put in some custom routes. Let's match /signin. And then let's match, while we're at it, let's do sign out, which will be to sessions destroy. So let's just get a reminder of what these routes buy us. Let's take a look at this table. So what the resources and the custom matchers give us in combination is responses to get, post, and delete to /signin, /sessions, and /signout. And then we have some named routes. We have the sign in path, the sessions path, and the sign out path. Now, you may recall that we have some integration tests to test these kinds of routes. So let's take a look at spec, requests, layout link spec. And we see here that we've got, it should have a sign up page, a /signup, so we can just copy that and say it should have a sign in page, /signin, get /signin, and it should have the sign in title. Now let's restart our work server. And there we go, we're green. We will test this layout link, this sign-in link, later on in this lesson. Of course, we'll not only test it, we'll actually implement it. So this is usually how I get started with a new resource. I just start getting the routes down and make sure that I've got the controller and controller tests set up. And so at this point, what we need to do is make an actual sign-in page, in analogy with the sign-up page. We're going to find that almost all of the work in this lesson goes into the create action. Let's just take a look at the controller here. Session controller, remember, currently has a new action. Let's just add a couple stubs here for create and destroy. And now let's get to work on the actual sign-in page. And as with the sign-up page, we're not going to test the HTML structure at all. At least we're not going to test drive it. At the end of the lesson, we will test it with an integration test. We'll actually go to the page and sign in by simulating a click. But for now, we're just going to be working with the view. So let's take a look at, it's an app views sessions, new.html.erb. And let's change the h1 here with sign in. And now, as you can probably guess, based on our work in the last lesson, we're going to use form for. So let's review that. There's new.html.erb for users is this form for. And then there's the argument at user, and then we say do f, and we use the form object to build up the form. But at this point, we're already running into a problem, because recall what this at user is. If we go to the users controller, remember at user in the new page, this is for a new user for the sign up page, we're doing user.new here to create an instance of the user class. So this is an active record object here. This at user is a Ruby object corresponding to the active record class user. But we don't have a model for the sessions. So what are we going to do in this case? Well, the answer is that we will end up using what are called cookies. You may have heard of these in the context of web applications. We're going to be using cookies to store sessions. And in particular, we're not going to have any sort of model on the back end corresponding to sessions. So inside of the new session action, we're not going to say at session equals session.new, because there is no session model. But that leaves us with a problem, which is what do we put in the form for here? We say form for at user here, and we trust that Rails knows how to turn this into some sort of useful form for manipulating users. In this case, we're going to have to push down to a slightly lower level and actually do a little bit by hand. In the case of the session, instead of giving it an object like at user, we're going to give it a symbol corresponding to the name of the resource we want to create. So let's do that. Form for, and we're going to say this is a session. And in the case of the at user variable, Rails knew how to construct the action of the form. So remember, the way a form works, let's just take a look at sign up. Form has an action. In this case, the action is /users, because that's how you create a new user, is you post to /users. In this case, we actually have to tell Rails explicitly the kind of URL we want. In this case, with an options hash that just says URL, is, well, we have a path to the thing that creates sessions. Let's recall that. In order to create a new session, we want to post to /sessions, and that has a named route, which is sessions path. So let's do that. Sessions path. And then it's the same. Do f. Just working an analogy with this. And we're going to do a lot of the same things. In fact, let's just copy one to get ourselves started. Now you may have noticed that I didn't put in this first line, this render shared error messages, because this thing works with active record objects. But we don't have an active record object here, so we're going to have to handle errors in a different way. And we'll see later on in the lesson how we'll do that. But at this point, let's just worry about getting these fields right. Actually, it's probably a good idea to put an end here. There we go. So think about what sort of labels and fields we need for this. Well, remember the mockup. This is a sign-in mockup. Sign-in consists of email and password. So in order to post that information, we need to have f.label email and f.text field email. And then let's make another div of class field and say f.label password and f.password field password. So let's take a look at this. It should be at /signin. And there we go. It doesn't look very good, but it's basically working. Actually, what we forgot here was the break. And there we go. So now this sign-in form looks pretty much like our sign-up form. Let's take a look. We're only missing one thing, which is the button to let people actually do the sign-in. So let's put that in. You can see here it's class equals actions, and you submit f.submit. So let's just do that. Now let's take a look at it. There we go. Now if we look at the source of this, we can see how that options hash worked. Remember we said form for session and then the URL, which was sessions path. And here it is. Form action equals sessions. Method post, which is the default. So that slash sessions came from sessions path here. And so you may wonder what this session symbol bought us. The answer is, if you look in the code here, it says label for session underscore email, session underscore email, session underscore password, and then there's also name session of email. So that's what that symbol bought us. When we put in the session symbol, Rails automatically constructed a form using this idea of a session. Now you could probably do it a different way, but this is the way that I think is most unified with the idea of signing in. Now if we look back at our mock-up, there's actually one little detail that I want to add in, which is a link for signing up. This is a common thing on the web. When you have a sign-in form, you have a link for people who are new users. So let's do that down here. Link to sign up now. And then it's going to be the sign up path. And there we go. Now, as usual, I simply can't resist temptation because I see this button and I want to click on it. So let's see what happens. Okay, so it didn't work. It's not particularly surprising, but now we know where we have to get started. But before we get to the next section of the lesson, let's make a commit. Let's add everything we put in and say git commit -m, and we're going to say added a sessions controller and a sign-in view. Okay, so what happened with this little submit here? And the answer is that it says it's missing template session / create. Because remember, when we post to /sessions, it gets handled by the create action. And it just falls off the end of the action by default and tries to render something corresponding to this action name. So that's why we don't have to say any render here. We could do this. We could do render new. This would work. In fact, we can run our test suite. So render new is superfluous, though, in this case. We don't need it. It's implicit. But here, we actually do need it. In fact, let's copy it. So in the case of a failed create, what we want to do is just render back the new page. So let's take a look at this. Let's reload this and see if it works. Good. So now we've just re-rendered the sign-in page, and this is how we're going to do it in real life. And you can notice, let's just put in mhartl at example.com, and so you can see down here in our debug information that there's a hash with the key session. This is the params hash, and it has email, then the email I submitted, and the password. So what we're going to do is extract the sign-in information from this session key in the params hash, and then we need to check to see if this user can actually sign in.